Blog Talk Radio.
Down to sleep, lay me down. I pray my soul is mine to keep. My soul and never step outside this bed. Never into all the evil. Now back from the dead.
Are you scared?
He's here.
The calling hours.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk here.
They will say that I have shed innocent blood. What's blood for, if not for shedding?
Welcome to episode 70 of the Calling Hours Horror Podcast on Horror Society Radio. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is not a rumor. It is not a myth. The dead man, Michael Jones of Horror Society and Living Dead magazine is back. And tonight, we are going to be talking to writers, producers, and directors Michael and Shawn Rasmussen about their new film, The Inhabitants. Really looks like an exciting film. Their Indiegogo was pretty exciting to look at. There seems to be a lot of interesting stuff going on there. So we are definitely going to be talking to them about that. We're also going to be talking to them about the other films that they have worked on, including 2005's Long Distance, The Ward from 2010, who, by the way, is a John Carpenter film, Dark Feed from 2013, and of course The Inhabitants, which they're working on this year. So I think it's going to be really good. They're going to be on from 8:30 until 9:30 this evening. So we will get all of that in, and we'll also discuss the genre in particular with them, and ask them questions about how they coexist as brothers on the set, how that works when they write together, how they formulate their ideas. We will also be reviewing tonight in our digital dismemberment spotlights Scream Factory's special edition Blu-ray release of Dog Soldiers, which I know many, many fans have been waiting for. And I have to tell you, it's quite amazing. There's a lot of material on there, a wealth of material, and just a highly entertaining film to go along with it. We will also be reviewing Olive Films' Blu-ray release of Satan's Blade, and I have to admit, from an extra standpoint, this is the best horror title I have seen from Olive Films yet. The film is definitely a little bit more of an obscure film, but it's not a film that I would necessarily straight out dismiss. There is certainly a lot to talk about when it comes to that film. We are going to be featuring the band Entrails and their most recent CD Obliteration in our Metal Blade Spotlight. Before we even get to that, let me give you a little bit of background info on Entrails. Entrails was formed in 1990-91 with the intention to follow the scene that Stockholm brought to light around the time that bands like Dismember, Entombed, and grave that cemented the brilliant Swedish death metal sound from T. Skarsgård's Sunlight Studio. Unfortunately, all attempts to record a demo at that time did not produce satisfactory results. In 1994, half of the lineup decided to move on and to do other things, and by the time Entrails were put to rest as an official band, Jimmy Lundquist continued writing songs in the following years, but even that was put to rest in 1998. In 2008, Entrails was suddenly resurrected. Lundquist found old Entrails recordings in a tape collection and decided that they deserved to be released as they should have been originally. With modern recording technology, the first two Entrails demos finally took shape. Vocal duties were eventually helmed by Jacques Svensson. Following the demos Reborn and Human Decay, Entrails signed to the Germany label FDA Records and released their debut album Tales from the Morgue in June of 2010. The album featured songs from both demos with a sound that had similarities to all of those glorious Swedish death metal albums recorded in the early 90s at the infamous Sunlight Studios. All songs were newly recorded, and Dan Swano was hired for the mixing and mastering process. After the release of the debut album, Entrails welcomed Ade Metrolis as the permanent drummer in the summer of 2010. In September 2011, the second album, The Tomb Awaits, was released featuring the rest of the songs from both demos and also with some old songs from the past mixed with some brand new ones. FDA Records handled the European release while Dark Descent Records from the U.S. did the album in North America. The reviews and feedback on The Tomb Awaits was even more massive, and the album got maximum ratings on several bigger magazines and blogs. During the winter of 2011-12, the band negotiated with several labels about a new record deal. Entrails were officially signed by Metal Blade Records in March of 2012. Entrails played numerous festival shows in the summer, like Partisan and Summer Breeze, and started recording the album in September in Jimmy's own studio. The recordings were finished by the end of the year, and the material got sent to Dan Swano once again for mixing and mastering. Raging Death finally got released in May of 2013. After the release, Pontus Samuelsson replaced Mattias Nilsson on guitars, and the band became more focused than before. Jimmy moved his studio into the woodshed where it all began in the 90s. The new, old surroundings inspired Jimmy to write material like never before. Several songs were written during the fall of 2013. One of the new songs ended up on a 7-inch release, Berserk, and was released in January of 2014 via Metal Blade. The B-side featured a cover song of Swedish heavy metal legends Heavy Load. Entrails did some shows in the UK, played great festivals like Maryland Death Fest and Stonehenge in the Netherlands, and released the Resurrected from the Grave demo collection in the summer. The album contained the two demos from 2009, Reborn and Human Decay, in a nice package. Meanwhile, in Sweden, Jimmy worked for a few more weeks on his studio. Some more space was added so the drums could be recorded easier, and by this, the Bloodshed Studios were complete. Rehearsals for the new album began, and recordings started on the 22nd of December 2014. The band finished the recordings mid-January, and once more, Dan Swano mixed and mastered the album entitled Obliteration, which was released in May this year, May 15th, through Metal Blade Records. So I found it to be an extremely heavy and entertaining album. So why don't we get to it? The first of our triple shot in the Entrails new release. Obliteration is the name of the CD. The name of the song is No Cross Left Unturned. just heard the song No Cross Left Unturned from the band Entrails off of their new CD, Obliteration. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, we will be hearing more from Obliteration here as the evening progresses. But now, it is time for some digital dismemberment.
Digital dismemberment.
And in our first digital dismemberment spotlight for the evening, we are going to be covering the Blu-ray release of Olive Films' Satan's Blade, 30th Anniversary Edition. A terrifying story of mystery, horror, and violence. What evil lurks in the woodlands? The haunting legend of the mountains becomes a shocking reality when seemingly innocent holiday makers become victims of sadistic stabbings. Romance and murder are horrifyingly entangled. Satan's Blade will stop at nothing. Also known as Espada Satanica, La Espada de Satan, and Satana Ostrica, Satan's Blade has been digitally remastered using the 35mm supplied by the film's producer-director, 30 years after its initial VHS release. And like I had mentioned before when I first started talking about the film, Olive Films a lot of times have put together beautifully renditioned Blu-ray releases of films, but there really hasn't been a lot in terms of special bonus supplemental material. In this case, they've certainly added a lot to this film, and we'll get to all of that in a minute. But to give you a little bit more of a synopsis on the film, the film was released in 1984, but it was shot in 1982, so there was a 2-year delay in the film being released, and the director, L. Scott Castillo Jr., talks about that a little bit in the behind-the-scenes interview that he does. But this is one of those in-the-woods stalkers, and kind of what's cool, a little bit of a variation, is it takes place in the wintertime, which is really cool. But to give you a little bit more of a premise on the film opens up, and we see a nice view of the opening, of the lake, and there's a tree with a knife thrown into it. So the movie starts out, we see two masked figures walk into a bank and rob it. They hold the two tellers, who are female, at gunpoint. They grab the cash, and there's a little bit of torture when it comes to the employees. One of the bank robbers takes a knife and tears open one of the female's shirts, kind of toys with her for a moment, when the other robber turns and shoots, killing them both. The robbers make their escape, and they're staying at a cabin at the lake. And as they undress, we find out that it's two women. Ruth, who's played by Meg Green, and Trish, who's played by Mary Seaman. They get out of the bank with about $50,000, and the plan is they're going to split it between themselves and a friend of theirs named George, who had worked security at the bank. Ruth draws up Trish a bath and tells her that she is going to alter the plan. She's going to cut George out so that it can be split two ways. Trish kind of feels skittish about this, and as she turns around, Ruth is standing there with a gun and winds up shooting her in the back, in the stomach, and then in the head. So she's decided just to go ahead and cut everybody out. So Ruth decides she's going to take the body and dump it, and as she's taking the body outside, she's stabbed from behind by someone mysterious. We don't know who it is. Well, the next day, we see two of the local sheriffs, Ben, who's played by Fred Armand, and Ski, who's played by Ski Mark Ford. They find the bodies. They find a symbol written in blood on the wall. It's kind of like an X, There's handprints in it and things like that. So there's a group of 5 young ladies. Marlene, played by Marty Neal. Sue, who's played by Ramona Andrada. Stephanie, played by Stephanie Lee Steele. Mary, by Susan Bennett. And Rita's, played by Diane Taylor. They come up to the cabins and want to rent a cabin. Now, right before they showed up, Tony, who's played by Tom Borsnio, and his partner Lisa, played by Eliza R. Malinovitz, Lil, played by Janine Lowe, and her partner Al, played by Thomas Q, are there also, and they have reservations. Well, they technically had the last room, and then the 5 young ladies show up, and they want a room as well, and they're a little hesitant about going somewhere else. Well, the lodge owner and his mother are sitting there, and there's hesitation about renting out the room, and the mother goes on to tell of a local legend. She talks about the legend of a giant man who used to live with his family in the mountains. But people kept coming up and bought the land and kept forcing this guy to move up the mountain until he had nowhere else to go. Allegedly, he had asked the gods for help, but instead he was given a weapon from the evil spirits and killed the people. In his madness, he goes too far and killed his family. Legend has it that he still lives beneath the water of the lake as a monster. The young ladies initially seemed a little scared by the story, but they decide that they don't want to go anywhere else, so they end up renting the place. There's some speculation with those particular female characters on whether or not they are a group of lesbians, things like that. To me, it's not really the central focus of the story, but it's an interesting side note, for the story, particularly with it being in the early 80s. That night, Al and Tony get drunk after their girlfriends go to bed, and they slip on a mask, and they scare the girls in the cabin next door. Lisa wakes up, and she's not happy because Tony's out there dicking around with the girls next door. Not that he's not doing anything wrong, but she's not happy that he's not there in bed with her. We find out a little bit later in the story from the 2 cops earlier that 14 years previously, 2 boys were killed in the same cabin that the group of ladies is staying in. Ski believes it's the same killer. Ben thinks it's just someone else. Well, the next morning, Al decides he's going to go fishing, Tony decides he's going to go fishing, and he's followed by Stephanie, one of the girls that he scared. She tries to come on to him, and he shuts her down because he's, married to Lisa. So, it's just a little friendly fishing thing, and when he gets back, he explains it to Lisa. He tells her, everything's okay. He doesn't want anyone else. He loves her. And they have the 80s sex in the bedroom, and everything's okay. A little bit later on that night, somebody slips into the girls' cabin and starts killing them one by one. In particular, in one gruesome scene, a young lady's face is held down in a sink full of water, and her throat is slit. So it's pretty interesting. So all of them are offed one by one, all the way at the end until it's Tony and Lisa left. And they wind up meeting their demise. Stephanie winds up surviving till the next day, and as she goes to make her escape in a twist turn, you find out who the killer is and what's going on. I don't want to give away the killer because, of course, I want you to see the movie. There's definitely supernatural elements to the film. People might have a slight problem with the pacing and might think that the acting is a little hackneyed. And it's certainly a low-budget independent film, but I don't think it's the worst thing I've ever seen. I really feel, of course, being the early 80s, they definitely hit all the tones and highlights from that time period. I love the location. I thought the cast was very amicable in doing their jobs. As far as the special features go, there is a new high-definition 2K transfer, And it looks pretty well considering the age of the film. Yes, there is some slight print damage, and you may notice it in certain scenes in the film, but it certainly does not detract from what was done. There's a director's narrative with L. Scott Castillo Jr. and Jesus Terran, and they just go into a lot of the history of the film, the knives, and things like that. There's a Remembering Satan's Blade director's interview as well, and that's where he talks about the knife and everything, the narrative with the director and Jesus Terran, of course, is throughout the film. There's a really nice photo gallery and a scrapbook. There's a Dutch home video scene and a Japanese home video scene, and there's nothing really different other than it's just scenes from the foreign films. You have the trailer, and there's a Satan's Blade 2 fan trailer as well. You know, there's a lot of history packed into it. Again, this is not one of those films that the majority of horror fans are going to know or be clamoring for, but it's definitely a nice missing piece in the horror genre, and it's something worth picking up. Overall, I would give the film about I'd say about a 2.5 out of 5. It's not as bad as some people would have you make it out to be. Again, you can definitely see the effort and the time that put into it and the loving craft that was put into it. So I would definitely at least recommend checking it out once. This may be, for most of you, this may be more of a rental or a one-time view than it is an own for your collection. Personally, I'm glad to have it in my collection as I did enjoy what I saw. As an overall rating, I would give the film a 7 out of 10. Again, I really feel like Olive Films did a fantastic job putting a lot of special features on this disc. And I hope it's a trend that continues with the company because I love to see lots and lots of special features and additions on a disc. So make sure to head on over to www.olivefilms.com and pick up your copy of Satan's Blade. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to have our feature interview with Michael and Shawn Rasmussen to talk about their upcoming project, The Inhabitants. But before that, we're going to go into our second Metal Blade Spotlight song. Once again, the name of the band is Entrails. The name of the CD is Obliteration. And the song is Reanimation of the Dead. And welcome back. You just heard Reanimation of the Dead off of the CD Obliteration from Entrails. We will have one more song from that after we do our feature interview. And speaking of our feature interview, we have one of our guests with us. We are going to be interviewing Michael and Shawn Rasmussen, and we're going to be talking about the Inhabitants and all of the other work that they have done. Which gentleman do I have with me? Is this Michael or Shawn?
You have both of us, actually. Hey, Michael.
Oh, I got both of you on one.
And that was Michael.
Gentlemen, how are you doing? And welcome to the Calling Hours Horror Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. We're excited.
You know it. I guess, first of all, let's talk about the interesting dynamic of the two of you being brothers and working on projects together. How did you both become involved with the film industry, and how is it working with one another as family?
Well, it's a lot. Well, first of all, this is Michael. I went to school for film and got my degree in film. And Shawn went to school and got a degree, and his degree was in engineering and computer science. And so I was kind of always interested in making films and creating stories. And Shawn kind of came to it after he worked in a corporate job for, how many years was that? So like 5 or 6 years, and then decided he came to me. He said, "Hey, dude, let's write a film together, and let's see if we can get it made." So it was kind of his decision to kind of come in late that kind of got us kind of jump started.
So basically after college, both of us, we were doing corporate jobs, and it's not extremely fulfilling to go to an office 8 hours a day. So we just thought it'd be fun to write a screenplay and go and maybe make a movie and have some fun doing that, and that's kind of how we got started.
But in terms of the dynamic,
now one of the things. Oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that I find interesting looking over your guys' IMDb page is, in particular, the horror genre is very prominently featured. What is it in particular about the horror genre that appeals to both of you?
Well, I've always been a fan of horror. This is Michael again. From growing up. I mean, I remember watching films like, I'm going to reference it, like The Changeling and some of these older kind of 1970s films that I just fell in love with when I was growing up. But to be completely honest with you, the reason it has continued to be, I mean, our first film was a dark kind of thriller, and then kind of once you get into that box, we were out in L.A. for a while, and once you get into that box, you kind of get kind of pigeonholed. Not that I am complaining. I'm happy to keep working in horror, but that's really kind of how come our credits are constant, are so consistently in horror, is because once Hollywood sees that you can create a horror film, they want more from you in that area. So
yeah, they're never asking us to do a romantic comedy, but that being said, we do love the horror genre, and what's amazing and fabulous about horror is that there are so many subgenres within horror that I think
there's so much to explore.
There is so much.
We're not treading the same area twice. So, yeah.
And of course, the first film that we're talking about is 2005's Long Distance, which starred Monica Hina. And one of the things that I find interesting about all of that too is, you guys wrote it together. And when I've had tandem writing groups on before, people who talk about, sometimes I write this element of the script and, this person will handle that element of the script. When you guys sit down and you write this out, how does that work for you? When you write, do you actually write in tandem? Or, Michael, is it you first? You sit down and you come up with this concept and you write this part of the story, and then Shawn reads it, and then Shawn sits down and he writes his thing. How does that process go for the two of you?
Well, it's definitely evolved from long distance to where it is now. Now we pretty much outline everything together. Before it was more of an organic thing, I think. Like with long distance, I think we kind of sat down and kind of wrote that one together on our own. But then with The Ward and with the other ones, we really do thoroughly outline the story, and then I'll go away and I'll write a section of it, and I'll give it to Shawn, and Shawn will give his notes on it, and we'll kind of go back and forth on it, and that's how it kind of evolved. We're not usually in the same room. He's not usually looking over my shoulder as I'm writing or anything like that. It's usually we just sort of take different segments. I'll give him a segment. I'll say, hey, take a stab at this, see what you can. But by that point, the story is pretty well fleshed out in a beat sheet.
Yeah, at first it was more organic, but we found that if you can't solve the idea of your story within the outlining stage, then you may actually have some serious problems when you sit down to finish writing the script. And so we do very extensive outlines and beat sheets before we even get to the stage of writing things. But as Michael says, I guess some writing teams are in the same room and they're spitballing ideas back and forth. But we don't do that. We just kind of work separately and then give each other notes and work in that fashion.
I will say it really helps that we're brothers. I don't know how people that haven't grown up together and can say anything to one another can do that without getting on each other's nerves to the point where, we know our limits, so I think that really is a help. I don't know how some people can do that too.
Yeah, I would think it would be really hard. Luckily as brothers we can, we may have a disagreement, but at the end of the day we're still brothers and we're drinking beers, but there's no quitting. There's no quitting that. So, other writing teams, I give them a lot of credit that they're able to work together and, they don't get frustrated and they have that same type of dynamic that we do.
Now, that was what I was going to ask you. You talk about how you guys are, at the end of the day, you're still family. You can sit down and drink a beer. But, in the course of you guys writing things, have you ever had a major disagreement when it came to a plot line or something that happens to a character? And, how do you go about resolving those issues?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Usually I think every one of our projects have had those moments. This is Michael again. And usually it's me going, that'll never work. I'm not doing it. We're not going to do that. And I'll go away I'll step away from the project for a couple of weeks, and then I'll come back and I'm like, Shawn, that would work. And I'll basically come around to it. But, we have our, not blow-ups, but we have definitely our big disagreements. But usually there's a reason Shawn gives a note there's a reason something's bothering him on it, and so eventually I do come around to it, but it takes a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say it's amazing how over time, sometimes it's really hard to swallow an idea the same day, but once you've heard the note or the idea, whether it's us or whether we're working with producers or production companies,
right.
It's amazing how, after a couple of days and maybe hitting the gym or whatever, how an idea that you get or the note that you get at first may seem rather ridiculous. It starts to make a lot more sense and, really seems many times to help out the story where at first you didn't think that it would at all.
Yeah.
Now, there was about a 5-year span between your first film and The Ward, 2010. And I want to hit on this film certainly for a few moments.
Thanks for reminding us.
Well, I was going to ask you, did you guys take some time off? Was it just you had a little bit of a hard time getting people to pick up your work? What was the delay between those two films?
Yeah, I mean, from the minute we finished the minute Long Distance was shot, we hit the ground running. Shawn did what you're not supposed to do. He basically picked up the phone and called every agent in L.A., got us an agent. We moved out to L.A. We were out there for 2 years pitching ideas and really kind of just every day doing what we could to get something off the ground, writing every day. And it was not a relaxed 5 years. But the funny thing was, once, after 2 or so years out in L.A., we decided to come back. We were from Boston. Come back to Boston and maybe see if we could maybe get something off the ground here. Wrote this small contained project called The Ward, and had all of the intentions of making it ourselves here in Boston. And then our agent kind of fell in love with the script and thought he could maybe sell it. And I'm sure we'll get into that later. But yeah, so it was 5 years of slugging, trying to get the next project going. It's really hard to get that second film off the ground. I think I would say the sophomore effort is the hardest one. Probably.
Yeah, and we did rewrites on The Ward for 3 years before that film got made. But as you can imagine, it was such a surreal conversation to have with your agent, where he's like, "Hey, this production company says they want to buy your script potentially for John Carpenter to direct your film." And the first thing that you think about is there is no way in hell that's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty exciting, and then there's just a lot of work that goes into developing a screenplay with John Carpenter once he gets on board, and that did take a long time.
But it was 5 years of writing every day. I mean, we did not take a break. There was no break there.
And you brought up John Carpenter, and that was the next thing I was going to ask you. A lot of people may not realize, of course, John has done so much in the genre. And he's not only a director, but he produces, he does music, he does all kinds of other things. But as an interesting side note for those that don't know, before The Ward, the last thing that John Carpenter had directed was 2 episodes of Masters of Horror, which was Pro-Life and Cigarette Burns. But, on his IMDb, The Ward is the last film that John Carpenter himself actually directed. Your script was optioned, and you were told that John Carpenter was the guy that was going to be doing it. What were your initial thoughts about that? And how much were you guys, beyond the script writing part of it, how much were you guys involved with the process once the filmmaking got started?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, our initial thought when we heard that the script was being bought for John Carpenter was that it would be a great opportunity to get a chance to work with someone that we idolize. But he hadn't made a movie since Ghost of Mars, which was about a decade.
Right.
So we didn't really think that the film would get made, and it was a pretty amazing experience as we moved further along the development cycle on the film. When it started to appear that this movie might actually get made, it was really frightening and exciting at the same time, if you can imagine.
But I don't want to. Sean's being a little coy about it. I mean, when we got that phone call, we were kind of. It was hard not to be the horror geeks that we are,
Sure.
Here's a person that I think I would say kind of helped shape a lot of the horror that we've written. I mean, certainly Halloween and those early films of his are the ones that have kind of sort of been on my radar and kind of influenced my writing style. So just to know that he was actually going to be somehow reading our script, we were kind of ecstatic. But then, of course, then the truth sort of set in. We realized that he'd had a lot of false starts over those 10 years. There were a lot of projects he'd been attached to that had fallen away, and so we had to try to kind of temper our enthusiasm. But we were really ecstatic to learn that he was going to be involved.
Now, once things, were finalized, and it was John Carpenter doing it, did they have you guys out on set? Did you get to observe anything? Did John talk to you about the script? Did he suggest revisions or anything like that? Kind of talk about how that part of the process worked for you guys. Yeah.
Well, like Shawn said, we were in 3 years in rewrites, or 3 years of rewrites. And the first thing we did was we got the very first interaction with John was on the phone. We were out here in Boston, and he was out in L.A., and they wanted to put us on the phone with him and just see, because he had some notes, and he gave us some general notes. And at that point, when we got off the phone with him, he's kind of like, guys, I love the script. It's a little. He thought it was a little too gothic for. I mean, he thought the gothic element of it, of that original script, was maybe just a little too on the nose, and so we didn't really know how that first phone call ended. I mean, we were like, is he going to do it or not? We were kind of like a little unsure. And so then, I don't know how much time passed. It was a lot. There was a lot of kind of dead air there for a little bit, and then we got a phone call that they wanted to fly us out to L.A. to meet with him and go over the script for 3 days. So we did that, and that was kind of fun because I always love to tell the story that John's a smoker, and you can't work anywhere in L.A. Inside that allows smoking. So we had to do it at this hotel pool. We went over the script page by page for 3 days with John, and
at a very swanky Beverly Hills hotel. It was pretty fun to sit poolside with John for 3 days.
And again, it was hard not to geek out and be the kind of, we love all your films, but we try to be professional.
Sure.
And he really, so just to give you some background, the script, when he got it, was took place in the present day. It was it had a lot of different elements to it. It used a lot of like camera, like surveillance stuff, technology, all these technological elements that when we sat down with him, the first thing he said is he's like, I've been doing. He actually it was kind of cool. He showed up at the meeting with like a stack of research, and one of the things the first thing he threw out was he's like, he said there was a court decision in the I don't know if it was the mid or late 70s that said no one could be held in a psychiatric hospital against their will if they're of legal age. So we need to set this in a period. So that's when we started kind of thinking about moving it sort of into the 60s or the 50s. And, that for us, that meant throwing out a lot of the surveillance footage and all this sort of stuff that we had was kind of crucial to the storyline. So we really had to change it quite a bit. There was a lot of rewriting that was involved to make it a period piece. But I think it's actually made it more of a timeless picture because there's no technology, there's no cell phones, there's no, there's none of those tropes that are used in modern day horror films. So it has kind of a
now ultimately since you guys wrote it, and you did the rewrites, and of course you got to work with John Carpenter. Ultimately, were you happy with the end result from where you started with writing it to where it ended on film? Do you still feel like it was ultimately your vision that made the screen?
Well, I'll speak for Shawn. We love the film. It's John's vision. I'll give him. It's definitely John's film. We had, we helped shape the story, but I'm not going to take credit for the way the film finally turned out. I mean, I think he did a great job. Again, I think we, as horror writers, we always kind of err on the side of kind of like going for the kind of the spooky, kind of gloomy sort of, kind of almost gothic sort of vibe. And he really wanted to take that away so that a lot of the horror was kind of in the more, like, I don't know if you've seen the film, but takes place in this kind of day room that's kind of like bright and sunny and very, very not what you would expect to be a horror sort of setting. So I'll give that to John. I think that was really brilliant on his part to have a lot of the horrific elements take place in daylight.
He definitely brings a different tone to the film. Most people anticipate the darkness and the creepiness, but moving into a daylight setting definitely changes the tone of the film, and it definitely brings it, to a different perspective.
Yeah, and he also was really, he really wanted the ghost to be more of a monster and a very physical being versus, a tradition, as he would refer to it, like a Casper ghost. So, I mean, I think even the ghost element is something that was purely, his vision.
Yeah, his fingerprints are all over that. I mean, I think the great thing about John, I think, is that, at least as from a screenwriting standpoint, is that one thing you didn't mention on his earlier filmography is he's written almost every film he's made up to a point.
Right.
And there's not a lot of writers he's worked with, but he's a writer, and so he knows how to give notes to other writers and how to collaborate with other writers in a way that doesn't feel like he's kind of sort of throwing his weight around. I really was impressed with how collaborative he was and how kind of giving he was. But in the end, he really knew how to give notes in such a way that he got everything he wanted, I think.
Now, in 2013, you guys took the next step. Not only did you guys write Dark Feed, but you guys directed Dark Feed. Yep. Now, moving up to the director's position, again, interesting, having co-directors for a project. I've worked on a couple of projects where I've seen that happen, and as an effects artist, sometimes you would get one director that would want one thing, and you would get one director that wanted another. Now, we talked about kind of how you guys deal with your vision as writers. Talk about how it was working as directors on your first feature film. And, again, being brothers, did you see things in the same path? Were there a lot more intense discussions when it came to who shot what scene?
No, again, I think the cool thing is that we wrote the script together. We knew when we were writing it, we sort of had the vibe. We knew what the vibe was we wanted. I mean, I think that we both were referencing the same films when we were kind of spitballing ideas around, and so we knew, Session 9 was one that really stuck with us when we were up here, and we're like, we want to do something kind of like that.
That was a good film. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was, and so I think that when we got actually to the set and started actually making the film, also because so much of this film was just sort of like do it yourself from every aspect, from the from craft services on up. I mean, we really didn't have time to kind of get stuck on who was doing what. I mean, it's like, if it's got to be done, we got to do it. I mean, there's just, I'll pick up a light, you hold boom, whatever. It was, Shawn and I kind of, we're waiting for that film where we can actually just sort of sit back and actually direct. We haven't had a chance to do that in these last two. So, I mean, I think that the cool thing about that is you're so busy multitasking, you can't get hung up on who's doing what. And I mean, you can't really, I just think we just got to get in the can. We just got to get that shot done. I mean, you can't be bickering about whether that was perfect or or that was what you saw versus what I saw. So that's the short answer. Is I think that, but because we were doing, I mean, in terms of the responsibilities, we were just doing so much. I don't think we really had a chance to sort of get hung up on who does what.
Yeah, we are still waiting for that first project where we can, really dive in fully as directors, because as Michael said, our Dark Feed and then our latest project, we pretty much have been wearing a ton of hats, and the only way you can get a film made when it's kind of do it yourself is you just have to do everything.
Yeah. But I will say also that, the reason we started writing initially was to direct. So Long Distance, the first one, we wrote with the intention of directing. That got acquired, and we didn't get a chance to do it. We wrote The Ward with the intention of directing it on our own. That didn't happen. Again, I'm not complaining. It was John Carpenter. But so
right.
I think we were definitely prepared and ready for when Dark Feed came around. It wasn't like we just said, okay, now it's time to direct. It's always been the end goal from 10 years since 10 years back. So
yeah, and the goal wasn't really even directing. The goal, as we said before, when we were working in corporate jobs, was we just wanted to go out and make a movie. And we've been very fortunate that people have wanted to make our screenplays, but
yeah.
But we really just wanted to go out and have fun and make something.
Yeah.
And we've been very fortunate.
I give you credit for going out there and doing it. I've worked on several independent films myself, so I definitely understand how it works. Wearing several hats. Whether you're producing, directing, anything along those lines, and it's nice to see that you're getting your vision out there. And speaking of your vision, let's start talking about the main reason I brought you guys onto the show, and that's your upcoming film, The Inhabitants. For those listening, just to give them a little bit of background info, the film revolves around a young couple who gets more than they bargained for when they purchase and renovate an old bed and breakfast in New England. A series of troubling events leads the husband to suspect that something terrible is hiding within the walls of this old house, and whatever it is has its sights set on his wife. First off, kind of tell everyone about how you came up with the concept for The Inhabitants.
Okay. Well, we have to go all the way back to Long Distance then, because when we were on set, the guy who purchased Long Distance and then ended up producing it is this great guy. He's been sort of our kind of mentor throughout the process. But when we were on set of that movie, he mentioned to us that he owned this house in Western Massachusetts that has this rich history. It's an old house from the 1600s, and he told us that it was very nonchalantly. He told us, and it's got a woman in black that kind of wanders the halls if you're out there. And I'm like, really? He was like, oh yeah, we've lived with it for however many years. But so he told us about this house, and I really kind of had forgotten about it. Then he worked on Dark Feed, and he again produced that film, and we had some of the early sort of screenings at his house, and we went out there, and it kind of got the kind of the juices flowing. We kind of got this idea of, maybe we could shoot a horror film here, and that's how it kind of came to be. So, and the more we found about, when we were out there, he told us about the history. The house was owned by Samuel Paris, who was the father of the girls that made the accusations during the Salem witch trials, and it was
Betty Paris and Abigail and his niece Abigail Williams. Yeah,
right. And it was also it was used during the Underground Railroad, so it had all these kind of hidden passageways behind the walls where they'd hide slaves, and he took us back and showed us these kind of creepy areas of the house, and we're like, this you couldn't make this up. So we just kind of wrote a story kind of around that. Our witch is not, specifically a specific historical figure, but it's sort of a merging of several historical witches or women that were accused of being witches, and used a lot of the historical facts surrounding that and the Salem witch trials. So that's how the story kind of came to be.
And it was really cool because before we wrote the screenplay, we just pitched him the idea of maybe shooting a ghost story in his house, and he was on board from the very beginning. So we knew that when we were writing the script that we had somebody who would be willing to help us make the movie after it was done, and it was really collaborative and really fun. He's a great author in his own right. He's a best-selling author all through Europe, and it was just great collaborating with him and knowing that we had his support as we got started on the project.
It was also
and of course,
go ahead.
I was going to say, of course, the gentleman you're speaking of is Glenn Cooper from Lascaux Media, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and the books that you're referring to, of course, Library of the Dead trilogy, over 6 million copies sold worldwide, and top 10 bestseller in multiple markets.
Yep.
It's pretty cool that you got in with him. How did you initially meet him, and how did he come in to actually owning a house with such historical connotations attached to it?
Yeah, he's such an interesting guy. When he bought our script for Long Distance, he was basically, at that time, he was a CEO of a pharmaceutical company, and he had always had an interest and passion for making films. So, he's a doctor as well as he was a CEO of a corporation, but he went back and got his undergraduate film degree while being a CEO of a pharmaceutical company. And when he was done with his degree, instead of making a student film, he went out and he bought our script, and that was his student film in a way as a producer. So before Long Distance, he hadn't really made a movie, and when we met him, he was not an author.
No,
at all.
The sad thing is I remember when he told us he'd first gotten this the deal. It was after we'd come back from LA, and so now he's written 10 or so books in that time, and we're still plugging away.
Yeah, we're on our fourth film, and he's written 10 books in probably half the time. But it's kind of been an overnight success for him as an author, and his books are fabulous. Yeah, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Now, when you were out there on set and you guys were filming, did you ever see the ghost? Did you get, a creepy vibe is, I really hate to use that word, that structure, but, did you get that creepy vibe? Did you guys ever experience anything odd while filming?
There were a few things. I will say that, again, like Glenn was, like I told you, Glenn was very matter of fact about it. Whatever inhabits that house in reality isn't sinister. It's not. It doesn't give you a creepy vibe. It's just sort of there. It's not sort of the traditional kind of ghost. But we did have things kind of we were all in one room and a chair fell over in the next room. Just the stuff you sort of hear about. And at first I was kind of that's a little weird. Why did that chair fall over? And Glenn's oh, it happens. But
yeah, I mean, there were really only 4 of us in the house, and we were all in the living room, kind of taking a look at the dailies. And in the kitchen, it was a pretty loud bang, and we were all like, "What was that?" But I guess that's happened many times for him before. So he was just like, "Oh."
He just kind of shrugged it off.
"Oh, it's a ghost." Yeah. So we do believe that there are elements that support his claims that house is haunted, for sure.
It was hard. I mean, I wish we could have captured the kind of, I don't know if we did capture the kind of the atmosphere of the house, but I guess we'll have to see.
now, what would be considered your two lead actors, Elise Couture, who plays Jessica, and you have Michael Reed, who plays Dan. Kind of talk about, how you met them, and, what was it about them that they fit your characters? What made you say, Michael's got to play Dan, and Elise, she's got to be the one to play Jessica? What was it that drew your attention to them, and what do you feel like they really brought out in their roles in the film?
Yeah. Well, again, this goes back to Dark Feed. We worked with both of them on Dark Feed. But in that process of getting our cast in Dark Feed, we had to do the audition process with, I don't know if you've ever done anything like that, but it's really impersonal, and I feel sorry for any actor. It's really hard. And you really don't, I think, get a feel for who they were. So when Shawn and I sat down to write this story, we wanted to write it with actors that we knew that in mind, so we could we wouldn't have to be trying to find somebody to fit that part. So Dan and Jessica were written with those actors in mind. We worked with them on Dark Feed. Both of them played very different characters in Dark Feed. But we knew that they had the chops to kind of tackle this type of stuff. We knew they could do it. So, that was the great thing about this film is we wrote it with a house in mind, with actors in mind, and it really helped the script come together fast because you knew what you could do. You knew the house's limitations. You knew the actors' abilities. So it really helped us. I think that was the fastest we ever wrote a script. Just because of those elements.
Yeah, and at the time, Michael Reed, he actually still lives in Los Angeles, but he came up here and he lived on our couch for a month and a half as we were shooting our film, and we all got a chance to get really close because we were basically living together. But it is great working with people that you've worked with in the past that can bring what you want to the characters. And one thing that's kind of funny is Michael Reed kind of goes completely crazy in Dark Feed, and he shaves his head and his eyebrows and basically just goes completely nuts. And the whole time we were shooting The Inhabitants, we were thinking about that night when we shot Dark Feed, and he actually did shave his head, and we were wondering if that would ever happen on The Inhabitants. But it was great working with them for sure.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I've been following your Facebook page and following everything about this film because I can't wait to see it. It definitely looks like something that's up my alley. And you have a small Meet the Cast segment on there, and of course, being an effects artist and everything, the first thing that jumped out at me was India Pearl, and of course she plays Lydia in your film, and her look is absolutely stunning. Can you kind of talk about how you guys met India and how pivotal her character is in the film?
Yeah, well, we met. She was suggested to us because actually the character that India plays wasn't going to get much screen time. We didn't want to show too much of the ghost, and so the original intent was to not have much screen time. So we just needed somebody to come in for a couple days to kind of sort of be the shadow in the corner. And once we met her and we saw what she was capable of, and some of the early kind of makeup tests, we decided to make her much more prevalent. So she is the primary threat in the film, and her role expanded upon us meeting her and seeing what we could do. So she just really brought it. And again, she's the nicest girl. You'd never know that she's actually a comedian, a stand-up comic. So you'd never know that was the same girl.
Yeah, but when she got into witch mode, she was really creepy. She was extremely creepy to be around.
Right. Shawn was handling the boom who was doing the boom operating on that a couple of those days, and her screams kind of blew out his eardrums.
Yes, I'd say so.
Now, of course, again, like I said, being an effects artist, one of the first things I always look at when I go to IMDb pages, who did the makeup, who did the effects, and Michael, you did the visual effects, and in the makeup department, I see, I hope I say her name right, Amber Vonner?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did she handle all of your effects work for the film?
She did. I mean, there wasn't. She did the makeup, but it wasn't a lot. I mean, if the blood and guts, I think, was more on our side, I think. But Amber did do India's makeup, like the shot of India on the Meet the Casting where she's out there in the woods. That's mostly Amber's makeup work.
Yeah, and we on both Dark Feet and Inhabitants, we worked with this woman named Katron, or I guess her name is Kristen Rowerdink.
Her name's kind of
now. But she's fabulous. She does a lot of work and has worked with Gwar.
She created the Gwar costumes, some of the costumes for Gwar.
Nice.
And she's amazing. You basically tell her something that you want or you're interested in creating, and she's just fabulous to work with.
But again, like we said, I mean, everybody sort of picked up. I mean, there was no specific person doing blood or whatever. I mean, whoever needed to do it did it. So sometimes India would come in and do her own makeup even.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like Katron would drop off blood or makeup or whatever and say, go at it, guys. And we just have to take a look at the makeup test.
We had a woman come in and sort of actually teach our actors how to use. I guess there's it's called a bruise kit or whatever. How to kind of do the bruising and stuff. And so, it was all sort of just kind of seat of our pants. That's how we make this movie. It would be nice to have a specific person like you come in and just do or just do effects without having to try to figure it all out.
Well, hey, the next time you guys work on I'm on the East Coast. Next time you guys work on a project, let me know. I would love to do something with you guys.
All right.
Yeah, we'd love it. We'd love it. Are you on the Northeast, or you're in North Carolina? Or are you?
I'm in North Carolina. I'm exactly dead middle of the East Coast.
Oh, okay. Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you guys shot the film in the winter of 2013. You pretty much financed it yourself. You guys got everything done, and now you guys have an Indiegogo up. And reading through the Indiegogo, the Indiegogo is basically to help with the process of creating deliverables for U.S. and international distribution and the marketing of the film. I always ask this of independent film directors, like I said, because I've been on this side of it as well. Kind of talk about the things that go into, you got the film done. You got what you want into it. Talk about what it's like in the current environment, shopping your project out there and trying to garner the interest in it from not only studios but fans as well.
Yeah, it's really challenging because there is so much content out there right now. But we've been fortunate to work with a woman who has a really strong reputation. Her name is Ronna Wallace, and she's a sales agent for movies. I think she sold one of Quentin's early films, and she sold Open Waters, and so she has a really great reputation in terms of if she takes on a film, people know that it's of a certain quality. And we worked with her on Dark Feet, and we were able to work with her on The Inhabitants as well. And she certainly is able to get our film seen by as many people as possible. But like you said, I think nowadays people are looking for, pretty strong name actors to help market their films, and there's so many elements that aren't even, that go into people picking up films that has nothing to do with the film itself. So it is a challenge as an independent filmmaker to get your film seen and to get people interested in distributing it, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that note is something we always hear. Is like, you have a cast of unknowns. It's going to be a hard sell. But fortunately, I think horror is one of the few genres that you can get away with that. I think it kind of works in to our advantage if you don't know who the actors are that are, because you don't know who's going to be the last one standing. You know what I'm saying? Like
I agree with you on that, because just to give you an idea, I'm 39 years old, and I tell people today, the younger generation who read at Horror Society and things like that, part of the allure of the horror films from the early years was the stars of your films were not necessarily the actors. It was your effects artists. It was the director. When you watch the original old Friday the 13th, Kevin Bacon wasn't a name. So when you saw Kevin Bacon on the screen, your automatic assumption wasn't, he's going to live till the end of the movie. You got shocked by those things, and I kind of like that when it comes to the independent horror film. Looking back on all of it, would you guys prefer to be working with, bigger name actors all the time, or is it more of a preference to be working with up and coming talent? And I don't want to say people that nobody's ever heard of, but you understand what I'm saying when I say that. Do you prefer the unknown factor?
Well, I mean, again, I've liked the talent we've worked with up to this point, but I will say that the note when we've been trying to sell this film, and we heard it on Dark Feed too, is that you really do need some name talent. So I think maybe in the future, I think our next project we probably will. I hope we'll work with somebody that has more of a recognizable name. It's sad, but I mean, I think that's really kind of necessary nowadays to kind of help sell your film. But I agree completely with what you're saying. I mean, you look at something like like Friday the 13th. That's just a cast of unknowns, and Kevin Bacon's famous now, but he wasn't at the time. And the same with Halloween and all those films, because you didn't know who was going to be the final girl. You didn't know who it would be, because they're all unknowns. But it's the market we live in now. It helps to have that, especially for Entrails, it seems, to have a name that they can recognize.
I think the other. So this is Shawn. I totally agree with you as well. I enjoy films where I don't know who the actors are, but I think with the explosion of content that is being created right now, that there is sort of more of a need for distributors to feel like they can market your film by having name talent, where maybe in the past when shooting on film was so much more difficult that maybe it wasn't as much of a necessity. But who knows? Things change. Things are changing in film all the time. So what's going on now will not be what's going on in 5 years. I'm hoping.
You're right about that. Now, to talk about the Indiegogo for a few more minutes here, there's, when it comes to Indiegogos, people offer all kinds of different incentives, and you guys definitely have a wealth of interesting things that people can get through donating, digital copies of the screenplay, things like that. But some of the things that I found on here that were absolutely stunning were, let's see, you have the T-shirts, you have the signed copy of Glenn Cooper's Library of Bestsellers, but, starting at the $250 range, you can get your hands on the surveillance monitors that are used in the film. There's a one-of-a-kind scrapbook that's featured in the film. Cross of the Lost Children, the birthing chair
with blood on it. With the blood on it.
We've been careful not to clean it off, just so that whoever gets it.
The hotel sign.
Yeah. That's one of K-Tron's creations.
Kind of talk about when you guys were putting that stuff together, a lot of filmmakers, a lot of times, that I've talked to now, look back and lament, talking about, I wish we had kept this from the film, or, I wish we still had that. When you guys put together these Indiegogos and you put together these absolutely fantastic incentives, those things are, they're kind of your baby too. As an effects artist, I can't lie to you. I've kept, several things from film sets. Looking back on it, 20 years from now, it's not about monetary value. It's just the remembrance of these things. How do you guys feel about giving away such great props and things from your films and putting those in the hands of, quote unquote, your investors, the people that are helping to put the film out there?
Yeah, well, I think of it that way, but I also think of it as these people, if they're going to give that level of funding, you want to kind of give them something that's worth their while. I don't want them just to kind of come away from it without anything that makes them feel like, they really are a part of the thing. And these things, we have fond memories of them, but I mean, we still have a lot of stuff, a lot of the medical gear from Dark Feet, and it's like it's not doing us any good. As fond memories there are with these things, they're not doing us any good sitting in storage. So
right.
I'm happy to get them out there to a horror fan if the price is right.
We just would love to share them with people, and we certainly have things that we're keeping from our projects that can, be things that we can look back on fondly. But there are so many things that you end up with at the end of a film that if we can share some of them with the fans, I mean, that's definitely something we do.
Well, I think, the original idea for this campaign came from Glenn and his son. And when we sat down to do it, I was like, well, if we're going to do this, I want to make sure that people are going to get some good. I want to make sure there's some good stuff, some good prizes. I don't want it just to be the standard, DVDs, T-shirts, and stuff, without having some really cool stuff on the top end. So we really we went down into our basement, took out all of our props, and said, okay, what do we really have an attachment to, and what can we let go? And so, we just,
Didn't you give away one of give away the one skeleton baby from the movie? I was surprised that you were willing to part with that, because that's a really good one.
I sleep with it every night, but I'm willing to part with it. No.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. I've been eyeballing a couple of these things, and there's still several days left on here, so I might be making a play for one of those. I don't know which one yet, but I'm definitely planning on making a play for something here.
That would be great.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you guys, and especially with the newer generation of filmmakers, what are your thoughts on how social media has changed filmmaking, and what are your thoughts on bigger name studios and directors using Indiegogo to get their projects going? For example, let's take the Veronica Mars movie. Big name director, big name actors, but yet they went to Indiegogo to get the film made. When Spike Lee, world famous director, worth millions and millions of dollars, goes to Indiegogo to get people to get his movie. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like is it something that big-time studios and directors should be using, or should it stay for the independent film director?
Well, I think, Veronica Mars is a great example, right, where basically Kickstarter funded a movie for the studios, and I don't believe they even gave it a theatrical release. I think I was at Redbox not long after it was finished, and it was already on DVD on Redbox. And there's a great example where the studio was able to get something made without having to pay for the production, and it didn't really kind of lead to.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's a slippery slope. It's kind of worrisome at that level. Because the studios are going to start to, they're going to be like, why don't you go try to raise the money on Kickstarter and see what you can get, and then we'll pitch in the rest. I don't like to see that too much. I mean, it is sort of the sort of area of like indie film to do this, but I have noticed. I mean, I swear the day that we start our Indiegogo, it seemed like 20 other of our friends started. It seems like everybody's doing crowdfunding now, and it's almost becoming like we were talking about with the noise on content. That there's so many crowdfunding campaigns now. I think it's going to lose its kind of I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I don't know how I feel about Spike Lee or Zach Braff or whoever the creator is of Veronica Mars. I mean, they don't need to. I don't think they need to come to crowdfunding to raise funding, and I really don't think they are going to raise funding. I think they're going to raise awareness.
Yeah,
honestly,
right.
I think that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it is. It is strange because on the one side, it doesn't seem like it's the right thing to do. On the other side, we know how hard it is to raise money. It is just so hard. It's just so hard as an independent filmmaker to, even successful filmmakers to get a movie made and to raise money to make a movie. I mean, it's really a sad commentary that Zach Braff had to go to Kickstarter to get his movie funded, that somebody out there didn't think that it was worth, But like Michael said, it might be for publicity more than anything else, but it's surprising to me that some of those projects can't get funding outside of the crowdsourcing campaigns. But we know it's hard, so they can't.
It's hard, yeah. It is hard.
They can.
Now, of course, it's very obvious you guys have a love for the genre. It seems like your projects are doing well. I'm really excited for The Inhabitants, and I can't wait to see it when it comes out. And I always ask this one, too, especially when I see that someone has an obvious love for the genre. I am not the world's biggest fan of remakes. However, being a brother duo who writes, a brother duo who directs, if the opportunity ever came up for you guys to write and direct a remake of any horror genre film, what would the film be and why?
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's really a tough one. I wouldn't want to something that's so sacred. I would probably want something more obscure, like maybe, I always, it's not really horror, but I always loved, is it Phase 4 or Phase 5? What is it?
Yes.
That Ant movie?
Yes, I know exactly what movie you're talking about.
Yeah,
yep.
I always thought that was cool, or would be awesome, could be updated very well or made very interesting. But if we did do it, again, I think the thing about remakes, if you're going, John Carpenter, The Thing was a remake. It's a
right.
brilliant, one of my favorites, but it was a remake of the old, Howard Hawks film. So I don't look down on them if they're done well. I actually just saw the town. Have you seen the town that dreaded sundown?
The town that dreaded sundown.
I
have the original from Scream Factory on Blu-ray. Absolutely love it. The new one I think is on Netflix, and after tonight's show, I'm actually going to sit down and watch that.
Check it out, because I was really impressed by that, and it felt like a film. It felt like a drive-in movie. I don't see many like that. That's not like it's not like Robert Rodriguez sort of just making the film look old. It just felt old. It was a really good movie. I liked it a lot. But I think that remakes can be done well. So we would definitely, if the opportunity presented itself in the film was something that we, it's not like a classic, we wouldn't be beyond doing it.
The only, once we wrote the John Carpenter's movie, we did get an opportunity to pitch a couple projects, and one of them was rebooting of the Hellraiser. Of Hellraiser, and that was pretty fun to kind of imagine the idea of getting a chance to do something.
Hey, Clive's
like that.
still talking about doing it, so maybe you should sit down and talk to Clive and maybe get that project rolling, because I would pay money to go see that.
Yeah, I don't think he needs my help. I think he sounds like he's back, so he might as well just do it himself. But I hear he killed him. Not spoiler alert, I hear he killed Pinhead, hasn't he? I think that's what the new one.
The Scarlet Gospels. Yeah, that's the big thing with Pinhead and Harry D'Amour finally having a face off. So,
really?
So to speak, quote unquote. Well, we're right here at the end, but I wanted to ask you guys. Of course, we know we're going to be watching for The Inhabitants coming out soon.
Yep.
But do you guys have any other projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Yes, we have 3 that are in various stages of development. There was one subculture that was it was actually at it was one of the Frontier selections at the Fantasia Film Market in 2013, and that one I think could be a lot of fun. It's sort of an urban descent, which I think you're going to be talking about dog cultures, right? So I thought nice segue, but it takes place under New York City. And it has a really cool vibe. Everybody says it's chud, but it would be more kind of like more of a kind of gritty sort of alien type film. And then there's another one that's sort of a backwoods horror film called Hide, about a clan of like sort of Acadians. I don't know if you know much about the Acadians. They're kind of inhabited sort of the French Canadian area, and then they were pushed out. They became Cajuns. So Acadians became the Cajuns down south, but sort of a thriller where they kind of get their revenge.
I like it.
Those 2, yeah. It's definitely we haven't done it yet, but we'd love to do sort of like a Texas Chainsaw type throwback. It has kind of that gritty vibe, and that's what that one would be. And then we have another one called Black Autumn, which is sort of again, they're all horror, but they're all very different. This would be more of a Lovecraftian. I guess the best way to pitch it is Lovecraftian Little Mermaid.
Oh, man!
All I'm gonna say. And that's it. And those are the big 3 that we're kind of pushing right now. They're all different budget levels too. So who knows which one would come in first? But
yeah, once we get The Inhabitants out.
Yeah, that's really sort of the primary focus right now. And we do actually have, knock on wood, we do have something maybe that we can announce in a couple weeks. So
yeah, we're very close to getting distribution on the film, which we're very excited about.
Yeah,
I love it. Well, anything comes through, all you have to do is contact me, and I'll get it up on Horror Society and get the word out for you guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on. Before you go, do you want to give website addresses, Facebook, Twitter, anything where anyone can follow you guys, your work, anything like that?
Well, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, it's easy to find, so it's Rasmussen Bros. So you type in @Rasmussen Bros, or on Facebook it's Rasmussen BROS, or on Instagram Rasmussen Bros. So it's easy to find us.
Yeah, and Michael, I don't want to run over it all, but like if you had a chance to remake any horror film, what project?
Yeah, I love hearing what fans would like to see remade. If I ever had to pick one, and
for those that are true Grindhouse fans, this will come across as blasphemy. It's even blasphemous for me to say it because I'm just not a remake kind of guy, but if I ever had the opportunity to remake a horror film and it was going to be done right, I would want Lucio Fulci's The Beyond.
Okay.
There's something about that film. I don't know if it's the locations in Louisiana. I don't know if it's just, you know, being an effects artist, of course I'm biased. I lean towards the bloodier stuff, but there was just something about that film that to this day it is still stuck to me. The only other film that I could think of, and again it's a Fulci film, would be, and I'm shocked that no one has remade it, would be Zombie.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
You know, I'm shocked that a guy like Quentin Tarantino, who is such a huge fan, and in fact, he was the reason why Anchor Bay put together a digital remastered version of The Beyond. I'm surprised he's never touched it or even thought about it. But those would be the two films to me that, if anyone was going to do them, those would be the two films that I would want to be a part of for that.
Yeah. Well, that would definitely piss off some people.
Yeah, it would.
Actually, remake either of those. I think
it would. But you know, it's you know, and it's nothing against the people that made them, but I feel like the major studios, they fucked up the Friday the 13th remake. You know, they fucked up the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. You know, people like to hate on it. I thought Rob Zombie's Halloween was actually pretty decent. Tyler Mane was an excellent Michael Myers. You know, but for the most part, most of the stuff that's been remade that came from our childhood, I think major studios have just dropped the ball on them. Look at how bad some of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies have been. I mean, it's pretty bad. I mean, now they're remaking Gremlins. I mean, really?
Oh no. You know they're going to be CGI. It's just not going to be.
Oh yeah, they've already said that it was going to be CGI, and that's the part that makes me want to throw up more than anything. But
yeah.
You know,
I do like some of Rob Zombie's other stuff, but the problem I always have with these prequels, I don't want to know the origin of my boogeyman. Like, boogeymen should not have origins, I don't think.
True.
What makes them creepy is not knowing how they came to be, and so knowing that he was like, you know, a child murderer, you know, I just don't. That doesn't work for me. And I think the prequel with the Texas Chainsaw got me kind of worried too. Like, I don't want to see how Leatherface came to be Leatherface. The cooling
exactly.
down.
I mean, it was the Michael Myers thing. You know, in Halloween, I can forgive it a little bit, but you know, the Jason. You know, when they redid Jason and tried to do all that, I just feel like they screwed it up so bad. I mean, why don't we have a movie where we see baby jaws grow into big jaws and find out how it all happened? You know, I mean, that's kind of where I feel like it's gone, but. Shawn, Michael, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on. You guys are always welcome. If you ever want to come on again, all you got to do is let me know. And if you have any news about any of your projects, no matter what it is, let me know, and we'll get it in. We'll get it in, man.
All right, cool.
Well, it was great.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great coming on tonight, Michael.
Yeah.
No problem. You guys are always welcome, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay,
sounds good.
All right, later.
All right, guys. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, we want to say thank you so much to Michael and Shawn Rasmussen for coming on to talk about their upcoming film, The Inhabitants. If you have not had a chance to go onto Facebook or go to the Indiegogo, look that up. I'm telling you, I have a feeling it's going to be a film that people are going to be talking about. These guys know what they're doing, and it's always nice to see filmmakers that do that. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to do our final Digital Dismemberment Spotlight, and that will be on Scream Factory's special collector's edition Blu-ray release, the Blu-ray and DVD combo pack of Dog Soldiers. But before that, we're going to go into our final Metal Blade Spotlight for the evening. The name of the band is Entrails. The CD is Obliteration. The song, Epitome of Death. Agony of Death from Entrails off of their most recent CD Obliteration. Make sure to head on over to metalblade.com, find out about tour dates, merchandise, and get this CD. Absolutely blazing metal and well worth every penny. But once again, it's time for some digital dismemberment.
Digital dismemberment.
6 Men, Full Moon, No Chances. The terrifying thriller Dog Soldiers gets the Scream Factory treatment with a collector's edition Blu-ray and DVD combo pack available June 23rd of this year. Fans who order their copy from shoutfactory.com will receive an exclusive Dog Soldiers poster available while supplies last, as well as an early shipping. Directed by Neil Marshall, who also did The Descent, Doomsday, Centurion, and episodes of Game of Thrones, and stars Kevin McKidd of Rome and Hannibal Rising, Sean Pertwee of Gotham and Event Horizon, Emma Cleesby of Doomsday, and Liam Cunningham, Game of Thrones and Clash of Titans. Dog Soldiers features a new 2K scan HD transfer supervised and approved by director Neil Marshall and comes loaded with brand new bonus features, including an audio commentary with director Neil Marshall, a look at the model of the sets created by production designer Simon Bowles, and a featurette, The Making of Dog Soldiers, featuring new interviews with director Neil Marshall, producers Christopher Figg and Keith Bell, actors Kevin McKidd, Sean Pertwee, Darren Morfitt, Leslie Simpson, and Emma Cleesby, special effects artist Bob King, special effects supervisor creature designer Dave Boniwell, production designer Simon Bowles, and director of photography Sam McCurdy. Dog Soldiers also includes Neil Marshall's short film Combat, theatrical trailers, and a still gallery. A gang of soldiers dispatched to the Scottish Highlands on a special training maneuvers face their biggest fears after they run into Captain Ryan, the only survivor of a special ops team that was literally torn to pieces. Ryan refuses to disclose his mission, even though whoever attacked his men might be hungry for seconds. Help arrives in the form of a local girl who shelters them in a deserted farmhouse deep in the forest. But when they realize that they were surrounded by a pack of bloodlusting werewolves, it's apparent their nightmare has just begun. As far as werewolf movies go, I tend to be a little bit picky and biased. Dog Soldiers is an absolutely phenomenal film. As I stated, the film starts off with a young couple camping in the Scottish Highlands. The young lady gives her boyfriend a silver letter opener as a reward for doing such a good job. Later on in the evening, as they are making out in their tent, they are attacked by an unseen assailant and are both brutally murdered. We then cut to a scene of a man running, and it turns out to be Private Cooper. He's running through a forest, and it's a training exercise led by Captain Ryan. And Cooper winds up being booted from the unit when he refuses to shoot a dog in cold blood. We flash forward a little bit later, 4 weeks later, and there's a squad of 6 regular soldiers, including Cooper. They're dropped into the Scottish Highlands. And they're supposed to be carrying out a training mission against a SAS unit. But all they find are bloody remains. The one survivor, who winds up being Captain Ryan, kind of makes garbled messages about who or what attacked them. As they try to leave the woods, the group is attacked themselves with one of the guys running so fast he runs into a tree and impales himself. It's Bruce. And Sergeant Wells is attacked and almost gutted. Cooper manages to rescue him, and as they run through the woods trying to avoid the wolves, they manage to stop a car who is driven by Megan, and she winds up, as you find out later, being a zoologist who is studying what's going on. And she takes them to a house that belongs to a family that she knows, but no one is there, just their dog. You have Wells, Cooper, Spoon, Joe, and Terry, and of course you have Ryan. The werewolves show up and absolutely destroy the vehicle, trapping them on the inside. At first they don't want to believe that it's werewolves, but Megan tells them that she's a zoologist. She's been studying it. This is what's going on. They try to defend themselves against the werewolves. If they can make it to sunrise, they can make it, but the odds don't look good. Cooper and Megan do their best to try and heal Wells. During a furious firefight, Terry is taken by the werewolves and ammunition runs low. They try to escape in a couple of different ways. Spoon hotwires a Land Rover that's in an outside garage, and he sees Terry being killed by a werewolf, eaten alive, and it rips its head off and throws it at the truck. He manages to get out and realizes there's a werewolf in the back, and he winds up being devoured as well. When things wind up being at their grimmest, Ryan finally reveals that the government has sent him out there to capture a live werewolf so it can be used as a weapon. Cooper's squad was the bait to draw the werewolves in, but the werewolves got the drop on Ryan and his group. There's a huge fight, and Ryan winds up turning into a werewolf because of his wounds, and he escapes. And as it turns out, the family that owns the house is the group of werewolves that's outside of the house trying to catch them. At the behest of Megan, they blow up the barn outside where she tells them that they're hiding. But she confesses later on that there were none in there. But she's a werewolf as well, and she gives in and starts to transform. She also reveals that she unlocked the back door and let the wolves inside. Wells runs into the room just as she starts to transform and shoots her in the head and kills her. He and Cooper run upstairs, and Spoon goes to the kitchen. Spoon, in a great scene, runs out of ammo, and he goes blow for blow with a werewolf in the kitchen. I mean, stabbing and just beating it to death, but winds up being murdered by a second werewolf that makes its way in. Wells and Cooper have to break through the floor to escape down into the kitchen. Wells starts to transform, but before he does, he cuts a gas line and they blow up the house. And Cooper's hiding in the basement. Once it's daylight, Cooper tries to leave, but Ryan, who is still a werewolf, they have a blow for blow in the basement. And as Ryan goes to kill him, the dog winds up distracting the werewolf long enough, and Cooper finds the silver letter opener that was in the beginning of the film, and stabs Ryan with it, then shoots him in the head. And one of the running jokes, the film is kind of considered a black comedy, but I don't see much comedy in it. There's all this talk of a football game, England-Germany, soccer for those Americans, and it shows the football score where England wins. And there's a smaller headline that shows a picture of Cooper and the headline, "Werewolves Ate My Platoon." So, very action-packed, very much a lot of fun, excellent effects, everything you should see in a werewolf movie. I would definitely give Dog Soldiers a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Definitely one of my favorite werewolf films. As far as bonus features go, this film has a plethora of bonus features. There's a new 2K scan HD transfer supervised and approved by director Neil Marshall. Film looks absolutely fantastic. There's new audio commentary with Neil Marshall. There's the Making of Dog Soldiers, featuring interviews with director Neil Marshall, producers Christopher Figg and Keith Bell, actors Kevin McKidd, Sean Pertwee, Darren Morfitt, Leslie Simpson and Emma Cleesby. Special effects artist Bob Keane. Special effects supervisor, creature designer Dave Bonniwell. Production designer Simon Bowles, and director of photography Sam McCurdy. Just a wealth of information. Anything you want to know about this film, it is right there. I thought it was pretty cool, too. I look at the models of the sets created by production designer Simon Bowles. You have the theatrical trailer. There's also a short film from Neil Marshall called Combat. Very interesting, about some gentlemen who go to a bar, meet women, but done in a war sense. So it's actually very interesting. There's also 2 still galleries. There's photos from the film and rare photos from production designer Simon Bowles and special effects artist Dave Bonniwell's archives. As an overall, I would give this disc a 9 out of 10 when it comes to the special features. Make sure to head on over to www.shoutfactory.com and pick up your copy of Dog Soldiers. Well, I think it's been a successful return this evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Dead Man is glad to be back. I want to thank my friends at Shout and Scream Factory for sending along our Blu-ray copy of Dog Soldiers. Excuse me, I want to say thank you to our friends at Olive Films for sending along our Blu-ray copy of Satan's Blade. Thank you to our friends at Metal Blade for sending along such great music, since we got to listen to Entrails and their new CD, Obliteration. Make sure to keep an ear out next week. I will go into more details on the Living Dead convention going on in Portland, Oregon in November. I want to say thank you, a very big thank you to Michael and Shawn Rasmussen for coming on and talking about the Inhabitants and all of their other projects. Until next week, this is the Dead Man from Horror Society telling you all to rest in peace.